What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Thursday edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones. We are brought to you by our wonderful friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clements Bridge Road in Deptford, New Jersey. And do not forget, they got the snow equipment, the accessories on sale, 20 to 30% off. And I don't know, maybe we can send a coupon to our resident hoops insider, our good friend Johnathan Marshall at John_Marshall3. And of course, does a great job, reporter anchor at WMUR. He's got the snow hat on, so I'm wondering if it's a little chilly up there in the Boston area, in the Mass area.
Just a little bit. Listen, we're not walking outside with shorts on. We're
Not yet.
bundled up. Layers is the key, Q. Layers.
Yes.
You can
Yeah.
hear the wind from outside. Everything's closed, but I can still hear. Yeah, I can still hear it all outside. Everything that's happening, I hear it.
Yes. So funny you mentioned, right, the wind and the rumblings, if you will, and the hot air.
Yeah.
It comes down with the trade deadline, which is come and gone in the association. We talked about maybe it's time the Lakers move LeBron. Maybe it's time Golden State moves Steph Curry, maybe Green, maybe Thompson. And then we find out that those teams were kind of sniffing around each other. Golden State seeing, hey, let's try to make a move for LeBron. It still tells you the kind of cachet that LeBron James has. I don't know how much validity to that report, but it's something you and I talked about a month or so ago, that these are teams that are not ascending, they're descending. And we anticipated that they were going to be sellers, not buyers.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think these front offices are stupid, right? They understand what the situation is for both sides. And at this point, it's like, hey, let's kick the tires on something. What's the worst that can happen? They'll say no, right? Let's just swing for it. You never know what might happen, right? I look at these two situations in LA and Golden State. You look at the standings, right? I don't see them entering into the top six in the Western Conference,
Not
right?
happening.
So by them not making any moves, to me, it says they're just comfortable with riding out with Steph and LeBron and seeing how far they can take us. They're hitching their wagons to LeBron and Steph. That's just what it is. And how far that'll get them, it's not going to be too far, honestly, because by not making a move, you say, okay, we don't want to rebuild. We're not there yet. We're not ready yet. But also, you're telling me that you're not honestly serious about contending, because you can't be serious with yourself. Signing a Spencer Dinwiddie is not going to move the needle. Sorry, it's just not going to work, right? So to me, they're in no man's land. This is where they've been all year. No movement at the deadline signals is going to be more of the same. I don't see a big shift from the Lakers like we saw last year. I don't see a big shift with Golden State. It is what it is. The problems aren't changing. Golden State, you have a bunch of young guys who are developing. Johnathan Kuminga, I like what I've seen from some of their young guys. But at the end of the day, with Steph Curry still at the peak of his powers, you can't have those two timelines cross and expect to compete. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So that's where I stand. It's status quo for the Lakers and Warriors. And at this point, I was talking to, this is a question that I asked someone, and a couple people actually, and I said, look, right now the playing is Dallas, Sacramento, the Lakers, and the Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the Warriors or the Lakers, do you want to have a one-game situation against Luka and Kyrie?
No.
Especially with the additions they've made. Do you want that situation? One game, not a series, is a one-game situation in the play-in. That's kind of scary.
Because I'm more confident in those two than just, say, having a ball dominant offense in Golden State with Curry than having to rely on Draymond Green getting his sea legs back to bench, or Klay Thompson in the fourth quarter. If he's struggling 3 of 16, is he going to make that big shot? And then conversely with the Lakers, it's LeBron and Davis. It's pretty much your 1-2 punch. Other than that, and you're right. I mean, I'm thinking about kind of leaning Golden State with some of these games. I know they'll play this evening. They're sitting at 500, 26-26. They're 12-12 away. They've got Utah, which is another team that, albeit plays much better at home than they do away, but they're getting a 1.5 in this one. Utah, I think, had a lot more higher expectations coming into the season. But the West, to me, it's top heavy with a couple of the teams that you mentioned, OKC, the Clippers, Minnesota, which is having a phenomenal season, right? I mean, you start to see now your 1-2 punch, your tandem. They're playing with perimeter defense. They get out and they push the pace. And then let me ask you something. If you're Denver right now, 36-19, you've lost 3 straight. You're defending NBA champs. I know we're approaching the All-Star break, but is there a concern? If you're Denver, I mean, do you see them matching up right now against a Minnesota team in the playoffs? And if so, would you give them the edge still because of who they have on the floor and they are the defending NBA champs?
I gotta give Denver the edge. When it comes to playoff time, like I got for teams and players, I have to see if you've actually done it before,
Hmm.
right? Like the Celtics, uh, as great as they've been, there's still caution because we haven't actually seen them. We've seen them make the finals, but can you take that next step and
Right.
actually? We saw what happened last year against Miami,
Right.
so there's still caution. With the Denver, we've seen it, right?
Yeah.
We've seen those steps that they've had to take over the years. They finally broke through last year, and so Minnesota, as big as I am on OKC, there's still steps that these players and these young teams have to take that Denver has taken. Like a playoff series is different from a regular season. Like it's the intensity rises, the attention rises up, the adjustments, like the coaching matters. Like I've seen what Mike Malone has done in the playoffs to win a championship. I've seen what the Joker has done, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., the role players that they have. So I still cannot count out Denver. I have to go with Denver if it comes to them facing a Minnesota or even a OKC. Just from a respect standpoint, an experience standpoint, a coaching standpoint, I've seen it all play out before, and I have to rely on that. Experience is huge. We rarely see young teams win championships. There's a reason for that. It's a different level, a different animal. Your room for error is slim
Yeah.
come playoff time.
How do you kind of, an outside view, when you look at a team like Phoenix with a bunch of veterans, you got Hall of Famers, you got, again, guys that can score. And I know Beal's banged up. He's still chipping in 18. You've got Booker giving you 27. You still got Durant. You've got guys off the bench. You've got Gordon. You've got a solid center as well, giving you a double-double and Nurkic. I don't understand, again, for the life of me, maybe this team is just wrong place, wrong time, wrong conference. I always look at Phoenix and I watch them a lot because they're playing, late. So I'll flip them on here and there. And I watch them. They have fourth quarter collapses. They look very indecisive at times. I think they still rely too much on Kevin Durant, but you have a guard and Booker that should be able to break down defenders
Yeah.
and dribble and go to the hoop. And you look at them right now, and on the surface, 33 and 22, and they are, what are they? They are 7-3 in their last 10. Okay, fine. But they're, you know, 5.5 back in the Western Conference seedings, Minnesota. And I don't think they match up well against the Clippers. I don't think they would match up well against Denver. And I'd be hard pressed to say I don't even think they match up well against Minnesota.
Yeah. I think you look at the top four teams in the West Q. One thing we can say about that is those teams aren't just a collection of talent. It's actually, you can see a cohesive
That's
basketball team, right?
excellent point. Yep.
With Minnesota, you see with the two big guys defensively, Anthony Edwards, everything revolves around Ant, right? But
Yeah.
we understand the role guys that they have. They have a veteran point guard in Mike Conley. They have guys who understand their roles. McDaniels, like they have different guys. OKC, we see the team and the foundation of what they are, just versatile guys everywhere. The Clippers, we know Kawhi, PG, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, but also you look at the role players that they have. I mean, Daniel Tice, like they have a couple bigs that, Ivica Zubac, like they have Mason Plumlee, like Norman Powell, Amir Coffey is stepping up and showing to be a player. Like they have a cohesive group of guys who know their roles outside of the star players, right? That you can rely on. Denver, need we say anymore? We know what that's about. That's a team. And so with Phoenix, obviously the big names, KD, Booker, and Bradley Beal, but outside of that, can we have a consistent effort from the role guys?
Mm,
Who's providing a rim presence? Who's
yeah.
providing defensive presence at the
Right.
rim? Who's providing that consistent, just these consistent things you can count on. Those teams atop of Phoenix in the Western Conference, they have multiple things that they can rely on that they can combat against Phoenix.
Yeah.
Phoenix, for me, it's KD, Booker, and Bill, and then we'll see what we can get from the other guys. It's not really an actual cohesive basketball situation.
Yeah. Johnathan Marshall
Collection of
joining
talent.
us. Yep. Johnathan Marshall joining us on BYP with Q. Rich, can you hear it? Late night in the associations, 3 on the docket tonight. We mentioned Golden State, Utah. You got the Bucks and Memphis, and then Minnesota that we just mentioned. They're laying 9.5 against a bad Portland team. Minnesota, I love what I'm seeing with Edwards. I love what I'm seeing with Cat Towns. I think they're arriving a little early, as we like to say. I was looking at, I love that Tankathon website because I was following it closely with the NFL draft, obviously. But then you start to look at the NBA and Charlotte, San Antonio, Washington, Detroit. Well, let me go like this. Detroit, we know their issues. Washington, we know their issues. San Antonio, Charlotte, Portland's a really bad team, 15-38. All these teams are in the midst of a rebuild. They're trying to find their identity.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know what was going on with Detroit and breaking that long losing streak. San Antonio believes they've got a franchise player, but then these other teams, not so much. 3 of the 4 have a 14% chance of getting that lottery ball and that number 1 overall pick. It would be crazy if San Antonio got the number 1 overall pick again. I don't know if the NBA wants Detroit to have the number 1 overall pick, to be quite honest with you. But then you look at Portland, 15-38. There's a lot of bad teams in the NBA. And I'm wondering if that is just a product of, bad coaching, just trying to give these, bad draft picks or bad free agent signings. It's just, there's bad basketball this year, man. Like bad basketball.
Yeah. When it comes to young teams specifically, coaching matters when it comes to development. I think like you at that point for Detroit or Washington or Portland, San Antonio, to me, it's all about development, right? Because you're not going to win games. So how are these guys developing? So you watch certain teams, it's like I don't see certain guys getting better. Like
Yeah.
what's going? So that's when I look at when it comes to coaching in these situations. And also, it's never just one thing, right? Championship franchises are A+ from the front office to the
Down.
coaching to the training to the medical
And
department.
that's in every sport, by the way. That's in every
Exactly.
sport, right?
It's
Look at the
top,
Super Bowl. Yep. Kansas City.
it's top to bottom.
Yeah.
It's a well-oiled machine. And where we see one single breakdown, everything is done. And that breakdown is usually when it comes to the front office and player development, player evaluation. Every situation that you can see in the NBA right now, whether it's a great situation or a bad situation, you can say, I can see some poor draft decisions. We can go back. Like there are some bad choices on draft night that we can go back to for some of these franchises. Like, what were you thinking? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I pull up any draft and you can pinpoint why Detroit is where they are right now. And Washington, that's a case of holding on for too long. Same with Portland. You should have been got rid of John Wall and Bradley Beal. You should have been got rid of Damon CJ 2 years too late. A lot of these teams hold on too long. And we're going to see that with the Hawks soon too, and the Bulls. Like we're going to see the Hawks and Bulls face the same situation. They're holding on too long. In a couple years, they're going to be in lottery land every year. Now they're just in play-in, but you can see slowly from the playoffs to the play-in to lottery, Chicago and Atlanta, they're on that same downward spiral. You can see.
They're right there with Brooklyn, Toronto, Charlotte. I mean, obviously Washington's a different animal, 9-45. And then, of course, the top teams in the Eastern Conference, Boston, Cleveland, Milwaukee, the Knicks. I'm curious to get your thoughts on my Knicks for a moment because, this was a team, and I pulled it up. They were, and I just want to double check my notes. They're 33-22. So they're 5-5. They lost 4 straight. Little concern here. They were 32-17. And now the knock is that Tibbs is basically running these guys into the ground, whether it's Randall, OG, DiVincenzo's dealing with the hammy injury. They played 40 plus minutes the last 8 games leading up to where we're at right now with some of these players being nicked up and injured. And I believe they're a solid playoff team. I just don't believe they're better than Milwaukee, Cleveland, or Boston.
Yeah, I mean, definitely not Boston and Milwaukee, right? There's just a certain level of star power that those two teams have, in those two situations. Cleveland's been playing great. I think Cleveland, when it comes to Cleveland, New York, we all have our minds on last year and what we saw in that series, right? So I think Cleveland have a lot to prove if they were to play the Knicks in a series, right? Like they still have to get rid of last year. Jared Allen saying that the lights were too bright. You don't want to hear that from your starting big, right? And so to me, that leaves a mark in my mind. Like, is Cleveland, is this a matchup that's just may not be right for them? You know what I mean? And so Cleveland, New York would be actually fun series. I really don't know who I would pick right now.
Yeah, but if Brunson's off,
if Brunson's off, then yeah. Like, right. It's so much relying. And which Julius Randle are we getting to?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So who's that third guy offensively that you can rely on to give you a bucket? Some of these, DiVincenzo's playing well. You got OG. Like these guys are great players in their roles. But I feel like to be a contending team, there has to be a consistent guy, a third guy that you can rely on to
But
get you a bucket. Mhm.
are they logging too many minutes though? I mean,
In some
when
cases,
guys are starting to break down a little bit, and then you got to think,
yeah,
the NBA season's such a grind, right?
yeah. Yeah, but that's the thing with this. Even back to Chicago, right? Like these guys, you can
Ran
see
them
the
in the
wear and
ground.
tear. And come playoff time, it's mental and physical, right? So at that point, how much do you have left?
Yeah,
Like that's something to look. That's something to look at for sure with New York. But I mean, I actually like what they're building. There's an actual basketball. It's a cohesive basketball unit that they're building. I still think they can use one more piece to really be a serious contender. But they're not a team that you want to face in the playoffs, though. It's not going to
no.
be easy. Not at
Are
all.
are you excited about Buddy Hield? About 6 years,
Listen,
6 years too late. I mean, has he
it's
even been in a league for 6 years? Yeah, he's been in
that's
the league for like a
hilarious.
decade, right?
It's actually look, it's actually fun to see a respectable shooter on the floor for the Sixers right now. But at the end of the day, I love what I see from Ricky Council. I love what I see from Buddy Hill, Maxey, of course. It really doesn't matter to me at this point because once again, the big fella isn't on the floor. So
Yeah,
until we get an update on what his situation is, I can't really get too caught up in what they're doing right now. Like I just can't because one player decides it all. And even if he does come back, how much how effective is he going to be? I really don't know.
yeah. What'd you think of? Yeah, I mean, the whole Doc Rivers thing, right, with the
Mhm.
All-Star game and All-Star week. I mean, that's a freaking joke in itself. But what do you think of the fact that he's calling the games and all of a sudden he gets hired, right? I mean, it's kind of like a goofy look, not only for like ESPN, but it's even a worse look to some extent with the NBA that you're, uh, trying to give this guy a little recognition, and he's had a cup of coffee with the Bucks.
I have thoughts on that entire Milwaukee situation. We can do a whole segment on that, Q. Honestly, um, it doesn't look good because he was a consultant to Adrian Griffin. So obviously whatever you were consulting him for wasn't working, right? So that's to me, that's a conflict of interest as well. The guy that you were consulting loses his job and you take his job.
That the
I'm
optics look
uncomfortable.
pretty bad.
I'm uncomfortable with that. You know what I mean? And so
So hold on a second. Not that
Mhm.
you're suggesting it, but I'll say it. I mean, is
Mhm.
it possible a little sabotage?
Listen, it's a business, right? Nothing like you can't put anything past anybody in the business world, right? Like it's like I don't know the connection that Doc and Adrian Griffin have. I don't know if there's any loyalty there. I don't know what their relationship is, right? But it's kind of odd that the guy that you bring in to replace him was a consultant. So you mean to tell me the front office didn't have any discussions with Doc saying just in case, be ready?
Oh, of course they did.
That's so
That's
that's
why
my
head coaches in the NFL do not like when they're on the hot seat
Mhm.
and you bring in coordinators who already had NFL coaching experience because they believe they're a couple losses away,
Yeah.
i.e., perhaps your guy, Nick Sirianni,
Yeah.
looking over their shoulder and being fired and having someone slip in and
Yeah.
take over.
That's and to me that whole situation is uncomfortable. I didn't like the optics of how Giannis and Adrian Griffin their interaction sometimes. If Adrian Griffin's trying to make a sub or Giannis not even respecting his voice, there were some situations where I'm looking at Milwaukee kind of funny right now, and I feel like Adrian Griffin got a bad deal.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a winning like your record was really good, second second in the Eastern
But that
Conference.
tells you but again, that tells you the NBA, and I feel as though we say it until we're blue in the face,
Yeah,
it is a player driven league. And
yeah,
Giannis used to be the toast of the NBA, humble guy, root for him, cheer for him. That's how they start off some of these players.
yeah,
Then they become malcontents. I want to take my ball. I want to go home. I want to leave
yeah,
the playground, get rid of this guy,
yeah.
trade for this guy, get rid of this guy, cut this guy. That's one of my biggest gripes with the NBA. I mean, and maybe I'm too old school in this, but I never foresaw or I can never envision a scenario where Isaiah Thomas was calling Jordan in the offseason, or Bird was calling Jordan, or Magic was calling one of those guys saying, hey, come play with us. It's just
Yeah.
never, man. Never in my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. I mean, the Milwaukee situation, I never saw it as a coaching issue. I saw it as a personnel issue. Like if you have problems defensively, well, look at the roster. Who on that team outside of Giannis and Brook Lopez? do you look at as a defensive
So you look
player?
at the GM, you look at the one that's I listen, and that's a really good point because I think the last time we spoke, we were talking about the defensive deficiency or inefficiency, if you will, with the Bucks, as opposed to last year, early on in this season. But they still were 20-something odd games over 500. By the way, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, right now, what do you think of Daryl Morey? Daryl Morey. I mean, do you think he's a good GM? Do you think he's kind of a snake? Do you think that this guy is just going to say he's a used car salesman? He's going to say whatever he's going to say. I mean, they turn around, they get rid of Pat Bev. They're going back and forth. Hey, I was told I was going to be at least part of this franchise, veteran guy. This is what I can do. Well, we never said we were going to trade you. Well, we never said we weren't going to trade you. I mean, to me, it just reeks of a guy that's talking out of both sides of his mouth.
It gives used car salesman vibes. You hear from James Harden, you hear from Pat Beverly. Okay, this is a trend now. There's something going on here, right? And he's a GM. To me, I don't think the vision is clear on what he wants to do. To
Yep.
me, it's throwing darts, hoping something sticks.
Never a good
Buddy
thing.
Hill. All right, okay, let's do it, And I just I don't think there's a vision, honestly. I think everything is pinning your hopes on a Joel Embiid, and wherever happens, happens, right? But when it comes to actually building a sustainable, cohesive basketball operation, I haven't seen it. I just
Yeah.
haven't. Like the Patrick Beverly deal to Milwaukee, Jaden Springer, who was showing some promise defensively, you trade him to Boston. Just certain moves that, okay, where is this going? Where is this leading to? And I just don't see it right now.
Two more before I let you get out of here, and always appreciate the time. Updated NBA odds. I mean, we can look at BetMGM, FanDuel, DraftKings, but I'll throw a name. Kawhi Leonard right now, anywhere from plus 2,500 to plus 3,000. We got the usual suspects in Joker. Your guy, SGA, you mentioned him before the season, and then Giannis at plus 700, pretty much across the board. First half of the NBA season, MVP.
Man, it's always a tough, conversation because do you read it off of just record, right? So Boston's number one in the East, Minnesota's number one in the West. So that case would be Ant-Man or Jason Tatum, right? This is a tough one, Q. If I had to pick right now, I would say, I want to go. This might be a shocker. I'm going to go. My pick would be Kawhi.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I brought it up. All right, yeah, I can make a case for Kawhi. Absolutely.
Because when it comes to, I mean, look, most viable, obviously, all these guys that are mentioned are viable to those teams, right? But more specifically with the Clippers, he makes that thing go like so many ways. That's the reason why I trust them in the playoffs is because of a Kawhi Leonard. This is the best he's played in a while.
Of course, they're going to be judged on can they finally get to an NBA Finals?
Of course.
Get to a Western Conference Finals.
Of course.
Get to the NBA Finals.
Of course. Yeah.
Let me just change the tone for a moment. And lastly, obviously, we saw what transpired yesterday in Kansas City during the Chiefs parade. I mentioned this last night, co-hosting with Angel Martinez on Tony Bruno's Sports Network, that I think you're going to see a time now. I'm wondering after what transpired yesterday, which was a god-awful incident, and thoughts and prayers to everyone involved that had to deal with that. And, obviously just the trauma and the lost lives, I believe it's 2 right now, but be that as it may, I said last night that is it possible now all 4 major sports leagues will look at how they handle celebrations, parades, and I was kind of bringing up the point that maybe we're going to come to a situation where it's going to be in an arena, and that will enable every single person that walks through that turnstile to be frisked. Whoop, 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 whoop. I mean, it's just, MLB, NBA, NHL, NFL. I'm sure right now the powers that be, you've got the NBA Finals right around the corner, right? You got the NHL Stanley Cup Finals around the corner. I'm wondering if they will look at that a little different in how we sell. We should be able to go to a parade with family and friends and kids and celebrate and have fun and throw confetti and have a couple pops and cheer and get loose and then go home safe.
Yeah, it's I was texting a friend group chat. It's like every other week we're checking off a place that isn't safe anymore, right? So far gone with schools, churches, the movie theater, right? Like
Malls,
a
synagogues,
nightclub, like,
nightclubs.
and now a place where a group of fans who are supporting the same thing, where you would think there would be unity
Yep.
and joyfulness and peace, a celebratory moment for an area has been
Horrible.
tarnished now. And so now, like you said, Q, like these teams have to start thinking about extra security now, like, because now that's sort of like that line's been crossed now for even championship celebrations. And
Yeah,
so,
and I hate the fact too that whether it was just three assholes that woke up hating the world or something personal vendetta, you still look at it as a terroristic threat. And
yeah,
I mentioned this last night, and my co-host Adrian Martinez kind of looked at me. He's like, "Man, you know what? That is crazy that you just brought that up." You would think, if anything, an event like yesterday, God forbid, it would have already happened, say, where in Times Square doing New Year's Eve
right,
and dropping the ball with
right,
millions and millions of
right,
people in an isolated
right,
area,
right.
right?
Yeah.
But now you get hundreds of thousands wanting to enjoy a ticket parade, and it's just. And again, I know it now. You're going to have an opportunity for people to come out, anti-gun, pro-gun. You're going to have the lobbyists. You're going to have the talking heads. Everyone's going to make the friggin' statement. Everyone can say we need change. The bottom line is we can talk about it until we're blue in the face, until somebody or legislation turns around, whatever side of the fence you're on, and they say enough is enough. This is how it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Period. We can
Yeah.
talk. But I think now sports looks at it differently, where extra security.
They have to, like, you can't rely on the politicians, right? Because the blood is on their hands too, right? Because the environment that we see and that we're living in a way, you've helped create this environment,
Yeah.
right? Nobody can agree on anything. You all have your own agendas, right? But we have the same conversations, but another week goes by and more innocent lives are lost, right? Like, so what are we even doing here? Do you even
Exactly.
care? But and until it reaches your home, that's when it's, you want to actually have a conversation. But no, these are American citizens. These are people that are trying to live right and do the right thing and celebrate. And the blood is on your hands. Right?
Yeah.
This is ridiculous at this point. And so I think these leagues and these teams specifically, when it comes to the celebrations, they have to really do. Unfortunately, they have to think about this now. Because of this incident last night in Kansas City. Now this is going to be on the minds of the next champion next year. It just has to
It
be.
has to be.
I think families are going to have to reconsider attending these things, right? I wouldn't, like, if the Chiefs were to win it again and I was a Chiefs fan,
You're probably hesitant,
you're hesitant.
of course.
It's unfortunate you don't want to live that way, but you have to proceed with caution. But now, just like in schools and churches and movie theaters, we know now it's possible, right? Like, kids now have to go to school with the realization that they have to be ready.
Yeah, the
They
world
have to be ready.
sucks. The world we live in sucks. I
Yeah.
really, my heart aches for this younger generation. Not the ones that think everything should be handed to them, but the hardworking ones with the good spirit, the good mind, the good morals, the good character. They work hard, and then you got to grow old into this crap. I mean, Jesus, I never. I went to school. You get on a school bus, you get in a little fight here and there, you go on the playground, you settle it, you go home. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was in elementary school, Columbine happened, and that was just like so far. That was so far. Like, wow, how could this happen?
Yep.
Right. And now it's sort of being kind of like a reoccurrence now, where kids have to be mindful, parents have to be mindful of, like, you just never know. It's
No.
a scary situation. It's a failure of leadership. To me, the blood is on their hands.
Yep. No, well said, my friend. Johnathan Marshall. Of course, give him a follow on X at John_Marshall3, sports anchor, reporter, WMUR with his snow hat on.
Gotta stay warm, layered up.
Yeah. Hey, it's all about layers, brother. It's always about layers. All right. Listen, always appreciate the insight. We'll do it again next week if you have a couple moments, and we'll start to look ahead second half of the NBA season, but always appreciate it, pal. And we also got to start diving into a little college hoops as well.
We do. It's going to be a wild year for March Madness, Q. I got a feeling though. There really isn't one team that's sticking out right now, but we'll talk
Right.
about
All right.
it.
Sounds good, brother. Always appreciate you.
All right, Q.